financial speculation, and crucifying us with their inflation time and time again. I'm taking this rostrum to demand that we be respected. We wish to live in peace. Stop trying to destabilize Honduras. Stop trying to impose your measures upon us, and stop trying to choose who we must have relations with. The people is sovereign, and that was demonstrated by them on the 28th of November when they supported my victory, a victory that was the biggest in my country's history. The resistance that combated the dictatorship that we lived under for 13 years. This 15th of September, we will celebrate our Independence Day. Indeed, we did, and I was accompanied by the people who spilled out onto the streets. They, in so doing, flew in the face of public threats, and they fought against this idea of giving over national goods to the highest bidder. Never again will the stereotype of a banana republic weigh heavy upon us. We will put an end to monopolies and oligopolies which do nothing more than impoverish our economies. A generous people that has paid with its blood to defend forests and rivers. This generous people will not forget that during the dictatorship, hundreds and hundreds of young people were killed. They will not forget that our comrade Berta Cáceres was killed. They will not forget the forced disappearance of Honduran people simply because of their way of thinking. And they will not forget any of the Garifuna comrades that disappeared 2 years ago now. Every millimeter of the homeland that they pillaged on behalf of the sacrosanct freedom of the market and other systems of privilege was spilled with blood. It was tainted with the blood of the indigenous peoples. My social and democratic government will return to the rule of law. We will rebuild a state of justice so that none of the above happens again. We are working hard to prioritize stimuli, and we are working hard to eliminate abuse of the fiscal system. We've already begun by promoting a law which declares energy a public good. We've returned workers' rights to them, and we have supported our internal market by investing in agriculture to ensure food security, and we have provided subsidies to the poorest among our citizens who will no longer pay for electric energy. We have set about renegotiating free trade treaties. We have taken the sovereign decision to invest in our development by substituting imports, but at the same time we are competing on international markets without subsidizing the excesses of developed nations. Women, for centuries, have been denied the right to be included in development. We will recognize the important role that women play in a society as a part of the very spinal column of that same society. We will provide healthcare, quality education, security, and food sovereignty to our children and our young people. For Honduras, every caravan of migrants that flees the dictatorship, as we saw for more than a decade, is a severe loss for our country and for their families. Figures suggest that this exodus, prompted by neoliberal injustice, creates more and more unemployment and means that we are doomed to dependency, an undesirable dependency indeed. Paradoxically, in our country, migrants create more foreign currency income than many of our traditional exports. We express our solidarity and support with the diaspora. In Honduras, we cannot continue to support the hypocrisy of a system which tries people for crimes linked to drug trafficking, however, for more than a decade, Honduras was supported in its attempts to commit crimes, had support for electoral fraud, and was supported in its attempts to commit crimes against the homeland, which affected millions of Honduran people. To get to the bottom of all of this and lay waste to it once and for all, we're going to establish an international commission to fight against corruption and impunity with the support of the Secretary General of the United Nations. Honduras will only have a future if it takes firm strides forward to dismantle the neoliberal economic dictatorship. As such, we're already getting to work remodeling our homeland and establishing an education system which instills Honduran people with the ideals and values of our national hero, Francisco Morazán Quesada. In Honduras, my government has embarked upon a process of national remodeling and is ushering in deep-rooted change, which is based on 4 fundamental pillars. 1, the revolutionary transformation of education. We've looked to extol the human spirit and eradicate colonialism. We're looking to build an alternative economic model which is deeply sovereign. Our third goal is to build a system whose very core is flying high the values of humanism, solidarity, and integration with brotherly peoples, peace, and respect for human rights. The 4th pillar of our new project is to progressively deprivatize public services such as healthcare, drinking water, electrical energy, and internet. Today, war is once again punishing the poorest of our world. Today, those of us that are invaded countries call for the return to the respect for the principle of the self-determination of peoples. We reject the cruel, heinous blockade visited upon the sister republic of Cuba and its people. It is time to have a serious discussion about the multipolar nature of our world. President Barack Obama took the first steps towards putting an end to this outrageous blockade. The President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, stated that the aggression against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela must now end once and for all. peoples of the world. As our comrade Berta Cáceres said, let us act, world. We still have time. Many thanks indeed.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Honduras for the statement just made and request protocol to escort Her Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos, President of the Republic of the Philippines, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honour to welcome His Excellency Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos, President of the Republic of the Philippines, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I am Ferdinand Marcos, and I am the President of the Republic of the Philippines. I stand today on behalf of 110 million Filipinos. At this time of crisis and opportunity, I bring with me the spirit of their enduring commitment to the ideals of our United Nations. This commitment is reflected in our solid contributions to the cause of peace and of justice. By shepherding the Manila Declaration of 1982, we helped affirm that differences should only be resolved through peaceful means. By reinforcing the predictability and stability of international law, particularly the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, we provided an example of how states should resolve their differences through reason and through right. These two contributions provide useful guidance for our time. For amidst challenging global tides, an important ballast stabilizes our common vessel. That is, our open, inclusive, and rules-based international order that is governed by international law and informed by the principles of equity and of justice. As I have underscored, the Philippines shall continue to be a friend to all and an enemy of none. This world order traces its roots to 77 years ago. Your first Asian predecessor, Mr. President, General Carlos P. Romulo, called on our leaders then to make this floor our last battlefield, to determine in this hall whether humanity is to survive or be wiped out in another Holocaust. Our peoples chose survival. They chose cooperation. They chose peace. And by doing so, they made history. Today, history once again calls to us to make these choices. We are confronted by tectonic shifts that will inform the ebb and flow of this coming century. Of these, I see four challenges to the continued survival of our global community. First is climate change. The time for talk about if and when has long since passed. It is here. It is now. Climate change is the greatest threat affecting our nations and our peoples. There is no other problem so global in nature that it requires a united effort, one led by the United Nations. The effects of climate change are uneven and reflect an historical injustice. Those who are least responsible suffer the most. The Philippines, for example, is a net carbon sink. We absorb more carbon dioxide than we emit. And yet, we are the fourth most vulnerable country to the effects of climate change. This injustice must be corrected and those who need to do more must act now. We accept our share of responsibility and will continue to do our part to avert this collective disaster. We call on the industrialized countries to immediately fulfill their obligations under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement, to cut their greenhouse gas emissions, provide climate financing and technology transfer for adaptation for the most vulnerable and developing countries, to lead by example. We look forward to concrete outcomes at the Conference of Parties in Egypt later this year. When future generations look back, let them not ask why we did not take this opportunity to turn the tide. Why did we continue in our profligate ways until it was too late? This threat knows no borders, no social class, nor any geopolitical consideration. How we address it will be the true test of our time. Second, the development of advanced technologies is rapidly transforming human life and experience. We still barely understand how these transformations are unfolding and where they are leading. The imminent diffusion of these emerging technologies could solve many of our old problems, but they could also disrupt our political and social orders. Our governance structures must keep up. Third, widening geopolitical polarities and sharpening strategic competitions are transforming the international political landscape. A profound lack of trust is putting enormous strains on our multilateral system. Our very charter is being violated around the world as we speak. In Asia, our hard-won peace and stability is under threat by increasing strategic and ideological tensions. These behoove us to uphold the ideals that led to the establishment of this Parliament of Nations, and to reject any attempt to deny or redefine our common understanding of these principles. Even as we grapple with these new long-term shifts, we remain beset by an unresolved problem. Inequalities and inequities within and among countries continue to persist, and they continue to demand urgent action. Therein lies our fourth transcendent challenge. This injustice was evident during the pandemic, when the richer nations immediately received vaccines at the expense of the have-nots. We see, for example, the dangers of this lurking in the persistent digital divide and in ballooning debt burdens. As we awaken from the economic stupor caused by the pandemic, we must reinvigorate the world economy. We must use public and private resources to encourage the expansion of trade, investment, and technology transfers to accelerate development. Knowledge and intellectual gains must flow freely to allow those lagging behind to catch up. Sustainable development will be hampered to the detriment of all if existing structures in the global economy remain unreformed. Mr. President, in these past 3 decades, Filipinos have achieved significant strides on our path to sustainable development. Despite the challenges of the pandemic and the global economic upheavals, we remain on track to reach upper middle income status by next year. With steady investment in food, public health, education, and other social services, we expect to become a moderately prosperous country by 2040. I am confident that we will achieve this vision. Yet, no nation stands alone. The achievement of our national ambition requires a global environment that creates conditions that allow all nations, including ours, to thrive in peace. We need the United Nations to continue to work, and we, the Philippines, are determined to be part of that solution. The Philippines did not hesitate to donate to the COVAX facility that helped provide vaccines in many parts of the developing world. Multilateralism and international cooperation do make a difference. Filipino health workers were at the front lines in many countries to curb the spread of the virus, risking and oftentimes sacrificing their own lives to save those of others. We have always been an optimistic and courageous nation. Despite the enormity of these challenges, we believe that solutions are within our collective grasp. You, Mr. President, have already identified 3 tools that are at our disposal. First, solidarity. We need to reaffirm the wisdom of the founders of our United Nations. This means transcending our differences and committing to ending war, upholding justice, respecting human rights, and maintaining international peace and security. Nuclear weapons continue to pose an existential threat despite our efforts to build norms that resoundingly prohibit them. We must reject the notion of deterrence and remain committed to decreasing the global stockpile of these weapons. At the same time, we must also address the scourge of the proliferation of all weapons, be they small arms, light weapons, or improvised explosive devices. Our work must also focus on ensuring that the international system remains fair, not only for all states, but more importantly, for all peoples. This system must work for the most vulnerable, especially the marginalized, migrants, refugees. The world has witnessed the enduring contribution of migrants in the fight against this pandemic. We still dream of an end to the disturbing incidents of racism, of Asian hate, of all prejudice. The Philippines United Nations Joint Program on Human Rights is an example of a constructive approach that puts our people, not our politics, at the center of this work. It provides a model for revitalizing the structures that facilitates solidarity between the United Nations and the sovereign duty bearer. Our continued solidarity will also benefit from a reformed and more inclusive Security Council and an empowered General Assembly that can hold the Council to account. At the same time, the United Nations must forge ahead with its flagship tradition of global peacekeeping. My country's experience in building peace and forging new paths of cooperation can enrich the work of the Security Council, and to this end, I appeal for the valuable support of all UN member states for the Philippines' candidature to the Security Council for the term of 2027 to 2028. Our success in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao in the south of the Philippines is a centerpiece of these efforts. The peace that we have forged after many decades of conflict among warring factions and clansmen demonstrates that unity is possible even in the most trying circumstances. Inclusive dialogue involving all stakeholders, including women, the youth, faith leaders, and civil society, conducted with patience and good faith, has produced a credible and solid foundation for self-government that paves the way for lasting peace and sustainable development. We take the same approach in Asia. The Philippines builds partnerships for peace and development through dialogue, including through interfaith and interreligious dialogue, especially through Asean. In the face of great diversity, we believe that partnerships form the bridge to unite all of us in promoting peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. Our global community is only as strong as we make it. We need to ensure that all nations, especially developing countries, are equipped with the tools they need to navigate the uncharted waters of this century. This requires a transformative development agenda. We therefore welcome the Summit of the Future next year as an opportunity to collectively roll up our sleeves and chart our common path. Second, sustainability. We must seek solutions that preserve our planet. These solutions must transcend our time and win the future for the succeeding generations. We crafted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as a platform of unity where our societies can build a future that is resilient and that is inclusive, where our people can be healthy, happy, and secure. This requires investment in food security, the fragility of which has been clearly demonstrated by the pandemic and the conflict in Ukraine. We need to take concrete steps towards a modern and resilient agriculture. For food is not just a trade commodity, nor is it just a livelihood. It is an existential imperative and a moral one. It is the very basis of human security. To attain food self-sufficiency and security, we are providing innovative solutions and financial support to farmers and fisherfolk to adapt new technologies and connect to national and global value supply chains. We look forward to forging cooperation with the UN and our partners to boost agricultural productivity and food security. As hosts to 17 UN agencies, programs, and funds, the Philippines strongly supports reforms to ensure that the UN development system delivers as one through its UN country team. Water connects our world and sustains our existence, but it is also a finite resource that requires our stewardship. Equally important, our biodiversity must be protected amidst the continuing challenge of climate change. We must enhance our cooperation in these areas. But sustainability also requires development policies that go beyond the traditional metrics. We already know that the gross domestic product is an incomplete measure of progress and that vulnerability is multidimensional. Our development agenda must also take into account the interest of all developing nations, including middle-income countries where the majority of the world's poor live. At the same time, sustainability means equipping our people with the tools they need to meet the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution. Investments in education are key, and my administration is prepared to make such investments. The Philippines notes with appreciation the Transforming Education Summit held earlier this week, at which these subjects were taken up. There is perhaps no greater renewable resource than the creativity and innovation of our young. We understand the value of harnessing our people's talents by creating a robust and creative economy. We will continue to work with partners in promoting this at the international level. Finally, science. Knowledge and discovery remain the keys to unlock the potential of our dynamic future. Encouraging our young people's curiosity, honing their skills, and protecting their intellectual properties are important investments. Humankind is pushing back its horizons, both in the digital world and out in our physical universe. Access to these domains is an inalienable right of all nations, as are peaceful uses of all existing and emerging technologies. The Philippines is preparing for the future by laying the governance framework that will allow us to harness the power of renewable energy, develop the capacity to utilize the life sciences, such as medicine and virology, pursue digital solutions towards a more modern economy, and expand our presence in outer space. But we also need to update the global structures that facilitate international cooperation on the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, biology, chemistry, to name but a few. At the same time, we need new structures to govern rapid advances in other areas. We need to start by defining the norms of responsible behavior in cyberspace and outer space, and forming legal rules that will prevent the weaponization of artificial intelligence. The diffusion of cutting-edge technology across the economy is promising, but they could come at a cost. Our development agenda must consider the possible displacement of human labor as a result of advances in automation. We must prepare our economic structures for this. We should start building the necessary supports for those sectors affected. Mr. President, the transcendent challenges of our time are as consequential as those that faced us 77 years ago when we founded this august body. We are indeed at a watershed moment, one that requires a refounding of these, our United Nations. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, the world is ready for transformation. It is up to us as leaders of our nations to move and shape that transformation. The future beckons, and we can embark upon that journey as single nations or as a world in harmony. I say, let the challenges of one people be the challenges for all nations. And in that way, the success of one will be a success for us all. The peoples of the world look to their leaders, to us, to make into reality these aspirations for our future. We must not fail them. And if we stand together, we will not fail them. If we stand together, we can only succeed. Let us dream, let us work for those successes for all our nations united. Thank you and good day.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of the Philippines for the statement just made and request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Gitanas Nausėda, President of the Republic of Lithuania, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honour to welcome His Excellency Gitanas Nausėda, President of the Republic of Lithuania, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Dear President of the General Assembly, dear Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Standing in front of this honorable Assembly of World Nations, I wanted to speak about peace, about challenges that the world is facing today: income inequality, pandemics, climate change. Unfortunately, today I have to speak about war. The war in Europe. The war which only deepens and not resolves all other issues. Ever since the founding of the United Nations, its central idea has been bringing countries together and ensuring peaceful coexistence. After the terrible sufferings of the Second World War, addressing global threats to international peace and security was the overriding concern. We owe a lot to those past leaders who struggled to recreate global order out of profound disorder. The darkest hour in human history inspired creating the rules which remain essential to the global coexistence of nations. For the first time in our history, peace had finally become a global value to be protected. Against all odds, the language of military aggression and conquest was condemned. In the context of global challenges, we often talk about human rights. But what about the right of countries to be sovereign and to defend their territorial integrity? On the 24th of February, a UN Security Council permanent member started an unjustified, unprovoked, and illegal war against a neighboring country. This gross violation of international law undermined the very essence of the United Nations. For the last 7 months, Russia's war against Ukraine has been taking a terrible toll on the Ukrainian people. Many thousands have been tortured and killed. Millions were displaced or forced to flee their homeland. However, this war has not broken the will of the brave Ukrainian people to defend their country. It has not diminished their fighting spirit. Massacres at Bucha, at Izium, have not brought them to their knees. The inherent love for freedom, passed from one generation